And we're back. Welcome to the Fordcast, the Friday Fordcast, with your host, J.G. Lockhart. That is I, that is me. Hey, it's a beautiful day that the Lord has made. Just want to welcome you to listening to the show. First off, let me just go ahead and pull this out a little bit. I want to thank the Father for allowing us to wake up to even be a part of this moment. I want to thank him for allowing you to be able to tune in and listen. So really just happy for that, for the blessings for today. We get another day. We get another opportunity. Yeah. So listen up. Today we're going to talk about a few things coming up on the show. We're going to talk about fear. We're going to talk about stress, of course. We're going to talk about this transit tax. We're going to do something new. We're going to do like little 10 minutes on transit tax at the end of the show, kind of do a history of it. So leading all the way up to Election Day. So stay tuned to the end of the show. You definitely want to catch the 10-minute transit talk tidbit. That's what we're calling it. But hey, let's go ahead and get right into it. Again, I am J.G. Lockhart, your host for the Fordcast. And let me just say this. I need to go back and apologize for some things from yesterday's show. All right. Of course, if you listen, you know, I'm a new grandfather. Blessed to be that. And I talked a little bit yesterday about how things have kind of changed from my perspective as far as being a grandfather and what type of legacy or what type of world I want to leave for my granddaughter. And I got caught up a little bit, and I dropped some bombs on the air. And I dropped some F-bombs. Let me just go ahead and say that. And that's not indicative of how I want to communicate. That's not what I want to convey as far as the language I want to speak to you guys. Now, I have a potty mouth. My father was a Marine. So before I was 10, I knew all the curse words. And, of course, growing up on the Ford, you absolutely had to learn how to curse if you wanted people to think that you were anything not soft. So, but, again, it's something that's controllable. And I just want to apologize to anybody that I might have offended. Actually, I'm just going to apologize to myself because I can do better, and I'm going to do better. I thought about putting a swear jar in here, and I don't think I want to look at a swear jar that I'm filling up for myself. Maybe that's the point of it, but just going forward, I'm going to watch it. So my apologies for the F-bombs yesterday, and if you were offended by some of the things, you got to go back and listen. I mean, I'm not laughing at the content, but, you know, I was talking about people who, you know you got family members that are out here, you know, messing up. We'll say that. So anyway, moving on for that. Talk a little bit about what's going on. The Panthers are headed to New York City, or rather New Jersey, to battle the winless Jets. You know, we broadcast here from Panther headquarters. I am the number one fan. Come challenge me if you want to. But our Panthers got a tough game this week, y'all. I mean, just to be honest, I'm going to let you know, Steve Wilks is waiting. All right. Steve Wilks has circled this game when it came out on the schedule way back when. And if you don't think that Steve Wilks is going to have his defense primed and pumped to shut the Panthers down, then you haven't been paying attention. Of course, Steve Wilks is the former hometown local product, you know, graduate West Charlotte Dub C. That, you know, was the interim head coach for the Panthers, and, you know, after Matt Rule, and was doing well, and for whatever reasons, which you can look into that, he was not chosen to be the head coach. Instead, we went with the guy, Frank Wright, you know, and, of course, he was subsequently fired, and we've been going through purgatory ever since, you know. But things are looking good. Things are kind of looking positive with Dave Canales and his boys right now. This is a big game. This is going to kind of show us where we are, who we are right now, because this is the winnable game for the Panthers. Although, I'm telling you, Steve Wilkes is going to have he's going to devise some things to shut Bryce down. He's going to try and slow Rico down. Steve Wilkes is a good coach. He's a good coach, and I wouldn't expect anything but from him throwing the kitchen sink at us. So I predict a low-scoring game. Special teams will be a factor. Ryan Fitzgerald, our kicker, our place kicker, he was NFC or NFL's special teams player of the week. He needs to show up. Our special teams is going to need to show up, and our defense is going to have to show up. The much talked about Ejiro Evero, who, all the newspapers for the last couple of years just been wanting to smear his name, saying he should be fired and all this. Well, look now, he has the number 9 defense in the NFL, but I predict that they're going to need to score at least a touchdown, a safety or something, because I think this is going to be a low-scoring game, and I'm looking forward to it. As much as I would love to see Steve Wilkes be successful, I don't want him to be successful this week, okay? So, Steve, I love you. I'm still waiting on you to come to the show, okay? I still want you on the show. But tough game this week. Tough game. All right, what else is going on? I don't know if you guys heard about the young Republicans and their racist tweets. I don't know if you heard any news about that. So anyway, the young Republicans are basically those Republicans that are under 40 years of age, and they have these different clubs, if you would call it that, throughout the country. But someone leaked some of their chats, and in those chats, you heard some of the leaders, like the top guys from different states, New York, Kansas, Arizona, Vermont. These guys were sitting here using the N-word, calling black people monkey, watermelon people, talking about Nazis, talking about Hitler is the greatest person. Just all types of stuff. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about yesterday. We are under assault from the inside. That movie, the movie Salt, you remember her with Angelina Jolie about, you have to check out that movie, but how hard would that not be in order to have someone from another country being raised over here? Look, our borders have been open for years. We've always been, open to sharing information with people, but what, if Germany has, and I think Donald Trump is an implant, he's trying to bring the country down from the inside. Look at the division. This man isn't about uniting people. He keeps trying to divide us with Democrats and Republicans. We all bleed red blood. Like, why does that matter? And if we all want the same thing for our families, why doesn't that matter? Fair money for fair work done. That's how it should be. And everybody should pay taxes according to that. What's wrong with that? But you got this guy trying to divide us over skin color, over fingernail length. Bald or short. Just ridiculous. But these young Republicans, they put out some pretty mean and nasty stuff. And to think that these are people under 40 born in 1985 or before, so that lets you know that, the civil rights movement of the 1960s, because we took our foot off the gas, the opposition to civil rights, they accelerated their efforts. And these people had kids, and these are the kids of those people. Imagine you growing up in your household, and the only thing you hear is nigger, 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 blacks are lazy, this, and you grow up, you thinking that. It's mental health as well, because you hear your parents or your grandparents spouting this vitriol, this stupid stuff. You grow up saying, that's what my grandpa said. Well, your grandpa was ignorant and, evil too, or whatever have it, because, that's what it is. So, these young Republicans, God help them. We have to pray for them. We really do. Because it's all about love, at the end of the day. We have to love on these people that don't feel loved. And, we have to do our own we have to do our own work. We really have to make sure that what we're doing every day is promoting democracy, or basically not letting democracy fall. I mean, literally, you cannot be on the side anymore at this time. You're either for this, or through your silence, you're against this. Because in these elections going forward now, if you choose not to vote, then you're voting for something, because your vote matters. I don't want to hear that shit. I was about to say it. I don't want to hear that crap about, my vote doesn't count, why this, blah, 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 Obama. We talked about that, and we'll rehash it again, but your vote does count. If your vote didn't count, then they would not be trying to restrict your vote right now. Trump would not be trying to sign executive orders to take certain voting methods away, take early voting away, taking voting at the booth, mail-in. If your vote didn't count, no one would be going through all this, because it wouldn't matter, right? Well, guess what? It does. So please stop saying that your vote doesn't count, okay? If you don't know who to vote for, then ask me, okay? Send me an email, JimRico@4Cast with Jim Rico, and I'll answer it. Go to my website, JGL4CLT, send me a message there, and I'll answer your question about, whatever what are my thoughts of who I should vote for, But again, we really have to reimagine what being a citizen of the United States is like. We have to become more informed, because we have not been informed, we've allowed people to come in and do these things. And that's why we are in the state where we are now. People looking over their shoulder, people distrusting one another. And that's not the way we should live. I mean, I'm not going to harp on Obama, but, when Obama was elected, although there were some people that didn't like him, there was so much harmony. It seemed like everybody thought we had reached the plateau to where, things would be better going forward. Well, perception and reality can sometimes be two different things. But the reality of it is, a lot of people did not like the fact that a black man was leading the country. And so they doubled down with the Tea Party, and now these megas, and now we have these young Republicans. And, I hate that, people want to divide us between Democrats and Republicans, because there are some Republicans that I know that don't agree with some of this crazy stuff. A lot of the Republicans are just conservative. They don't believe in government spending, overspending money. Now, here's the thing. The government, and whoever's been running the government for the past 249 years of this country, has gotten us into this $37 trillion deficit. It is not black and brown people who have gotten us into this $1 trillion deficit. So please stop blaming black and colored folk for America's problems, okay? Because black people were not doing this, all right? There are more people that are using government services that are not black and brown folks, so it is not us, all right? Learn. Let's get educated. Okay, all right. So on the same note, did you hear about the Ohio Republican representative? This is a guy that was elected by his people in Ohio to go to Washington to represent their state. This guy, Dave Taylor, had an American flag that was altered to have a swastika where the stars are on the American flag. Now, if you don't know what a swastika, it is the flag for the Nazis from Nazi Germany when Hitler was in power. It looks like the snakes and all that. That's a swastika. So this guy actually had that flying in his office in the Capitol. Capitol Police were called. Apparently, they're doing an investigation. But again, this is happening inside our country. And you have people that are not paying attention to this. This is real. This is serious. I don't care what you think. So understand this. If you allow yourself to be taken advantage of and you don't speak up, then you deserve to be taken advantage of. That's it. And that's how these people are going at it. Hey, they're letting us do it, so let's keep doing it more. It's almost like a fake bomb goes off and they want to see what happens. Oh, okay, nothing happens, then we'll let off a real bomb. That's kind of prepping you for what's really going to happen. And all this other stuff, sending in the National Guard. I mean, if you didn't pay attention to civics when you were in school, then this is what was going on in other countries that we read about. Wars in the street, the military being deployed into the cities to battle their own people. Why? Because freedom of speech rights are being violated. You can't say anything. You really have to pay attention. You really, really have to pay attention. But, the people in Ohio, you elected this guy. And those of you in Ohio that did not elect this guy, then, you should really, those of you who did not elect this guy by not voting, then you should be ashamed of yourself. Because whoever wins is a product of who voted for this person who didn't vote at all. Not the people who didn't vote, because they used their vote to say no. But if you didn't vote at all and the person that's doing bad won, then you're just as responsible. And that's on a national level down to a local level. So we really have to imagine what it looks like to be an informed American. All right. So democracy is real, y'all. Democracy is real. If you don't understand what democracy is, it's basically how our country is ran by people who vote for elected officials. That's a democracy. The opposite of that is you don't get to vote and people can decide who they want to be. Kings, a monarchy, like this guy's trying to eliminate the voting, So I believe he said that you won't ever have to vote again. No, we want the option to choose who leads us. That's democracy. So understand that if you don't fight for it, it can be taken away. So really, honestly and truly, as far as our own voting, shifting gears here a little bit, right now the polls are open in Mecklenburg County. On the ballot, you're voting for mayor, you're voting for what else you voted for? School board. And, of course, you're voting for this transit tax referendum as they are putting on the ballot the sales tax increase. So we know we don't want to pay more taxes when we don't have to. This is one of those times when you don't have to pay more taxes. Now, there's some times when you have to pay more taxes. They're going to increase your taxes. But this is the time when they're giving you the option of whether or not you want to increase. But they're saying that this tax is going to do something. So stay tuned at the end of the show. We're going to talk a little bit about this, the history of the transit tax. But, of course, in Mecklenburg County, the only voting location that's open right now is the Harold Marshall Annex on College Street to get your early voting in from 8 till 5 today. There's no early voting Saturday or Sunday. So if you're going to vote, make sure you get down there before they close at 5 o'clock. And, of course, I'm a huge opponent of this transit tax. It is not for Charlotte. It's not even for Mecklenburg County. It doesn't even do anything. I actually heard Harvey Gantt on the radio this morning, and I got a little disheartened because I don't know if you listened to the show yesterday. I was talking about a conversation I was having with Anthony Fox, and he was also saying it was for this. And I was like, hey, listen, I can't believe that, you're for this. You obviously must have not read it all and blah, blah, blah. And that's just it. We've got people who are not reading this information and saying that. Now, the flip side of that is we've got people that are getting paid to come out for a position. That sucks. I haven't spoken directly with Harvey Gantt, but I got to believe the guy is, getting up in age and maybe he needs some, 50,000 to do with it. I don't know. I'm not going to say that. But I can't believe that a man with intelligence would look at this and say, oh, yeah, this is a great plan. So I just have to stand on the fact that he doesn't know everything that's going on. The PAVE Act is 27 pages long. Okay, I'm one of the few nerds that that have read this thing front to back. The Transit Governance Interlocal Agreement is 9 pages long. I'm one of the few that's read the first, second, and third, the original, the second, and third amended agreement. So, unless you really got some time on your hands or you're just a true nerd like myself, you're not going to spend your time reading this. And I know that these people are not. They don't even live here. So why would they? What is in it for them? You have to think about that. What is in it for this guy to say that this is good? So anyway, that's about Harvey Gantt. Maybe I can have him on the show. When I run into him, I'm going to give him that frown face look like, hey, man, did you really do that? Okay. All right. We're going to take a quick break. And coming back, we're going to talk a little bit about fear and stress. They kind of go hand in hand, but we definitely want to talk about it, especially at this time, because we are in stressful times and there is a lot of fear going on. So stay tuned to the show, and we'll be right back. This is the Forecast with JG Lockhart.
Give it to me now. Give it to me now. Yeah, 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 yeah. Give it to me now. Give it to me now.
All right, we're back here at the Forecast with your host, JG Lockhart. I just want to go ahead and put it out there that I do not own the rights to any of this music that you're hearing. I just like to have music coming in and out, right? Okay. And we're on a pauper's budget, too, as well, so... But just want to put that out there. I do not own the rights to any of this music that you're hearing. Okay, so right before we went to break, we were talking about going into fear, fear and stress, and they kind of go hand in hand. And there is a lot of fear out there right now, and there's so many different types of fear. When I was putting the notes together, I was just like, wow. Why are we afraid? There's so many things that we're afraid of that we don't even realize how much it affects our behavior. I think about, I have an older relative. She's in her 80s, and we'll just call her Cousin Joyce, okay? So Cousin Joyce, like when my father was alive, whenever she went to use the remote control, she would always hit a different button, and next thing you know, she can't work the TV. So Cousin Joyce will call me, and I'll hop in the car, and I'll go over, and oh, yeah, you put it on video instead of TV. Like something simple. And I was like, well, listen, remember when that happens? And, I try to explain to her, and she's like, oh, well, okay. She really doesn't want to learn to work it. And I think it's because of the, fear. It's fear because she doesn't know or whatever, but it's a fear. And I remember my father being the same way. Was just afraid. And guys, that fear is something. I was about to curse again. Oh my goodness. Different types of fears. We have the fear of being wrong, right? And sometimes those fears are because of what could be perceived. We have a fear of our feelings being hurt, fears of shame, fears of societal backlash. There are all so many types of fear. And, the Bible talks about, fear in a number of chapters or books in the Bible. And, I'm not throwing my religion off on anybody, but it talks about fear so much. And of course, we all know that, you should put your fear in God. But in Isaiah, and I'm just going to throw it out there, it talks about, I think this is the 35th chapter, 4th verse. Say to those who are fearful hearted, be strong, do not fear. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. Like, that's some powerful stuff, basically saying, hey, there's no need to be afraid. God has your back. And if you know God like I know God, and and if you don't know God like I do, well, trust me, there is somebody who has your back. Whether or not you want to believe it or not, somebody's looking out for you. You woke up this morning, you're listening to this episode right here. Somebody breathed life into you. You just aren't doing this on your own. So the Spirit has control, and fear is an emotion. It's an emotion, just like happiness, just like sadness. It's an emotion. So when we are afraid, it is something that can be controlled. For me growing up, I used to hate to smile. And I didn't want to smile for a number of reasons. Number one, I had this big, huge gap, and I was ashamed of it, and I was fearful of being picked at. My older sister used to just ride me hard about my teeth. And I never wanted to smile. Now you can't keep my mouth closed most of the time. But I had a fear of, somebody picking at me or talking about, how I looked. And, I didn't want to feel bad. So I had a fear of smiling. I had a fear of I'm knock needed. So I had a fear of going out and actually running because people would like to make fun of the way I ran, like, so I wouldn't run like stupid stuff. When you're growing up on the west side in the neighborhood that I grew up, you had a fear of smiling because you did not want to be perceived as being weak. Like somebody might ask, what you smiling at? You know what I'm saying? Like you wanted to be hard, like you want to be perceived hard. And one of the biggest fears I remember, oh my gosh. So I was in my 20s and on one of my renaissance, trying to figure out life for myself. And I realized that I actually like listening to classical music as well as other types of music. I listen to rap, classical, rock, and whatnot. But I really like classical music because I had played in an orchestra in school. And whenever I would be listening to classical music on the radio or whatever, 90.7 or whatever that station is in Charlotte, whenever I would roll up in the hood, I would turn it down. I would turn it down because I didn't want to have anybody listen to me blasting Johann Sebastian Bach or Beethoven, all that. Even the same thing with gospel music, like I didn't want to roll up, with blasting Lord because, I didn't want to be perceived. So I was fearful of how I would be perceived. So fear is something. And even now, we have parenting. Sometimes we parent from a place of fear. We don't want to correct our kids for fear of not wanting to look like the bad guy. We want to be looked at as this holy person in our kids' eyes. And, we want to be the good guy, but, it's okay for your kids to, be let down. And that fear that you have and will sometimes lead to you making bad decisions as far as how you're parenting. And then when you look back on it, you'll be like, damn, I should have, okay, we're not going to count damn as a curse word, but it makes you look back and say, damn, I shouldn't have been afraid to do this, or I was afraid this might happen. I remember my daughters a couple of times when they got to be of age and the teachers were suggesting that, maybe they should move up grade because of their intelligence level. And their mothers, two different mothers, at two different times were like, I'm afraid that they're going to, miss out on their social life and all this. Oh, my God. Whew. Can I tell you, that pissed me the hell off. Okay, damn, there it is again. Okay, so anyway, sometimes those fears, but what happened with them was that they stayed in the grades that they were, and they were bored, and they didn't do like as well as they could have done because they weren't being challenged. So, you have to really kind of understand when you are afraid of something, what that fear is about and what you're actually afraid of. I have a cousin who's terribly afraid of dogs, terribly afraid. And, so afraid. I have a German Shepherd, Misha. But my cousin is so afraid that when she comes to the house, she won't even get out of her car. Like she is that afraid. She'll call me on the phone and be like, I'm here. Is your dog up? Like she won't even come to the door. Now, she had an incident when she was younger where she was attacked by a dog. And so she has PTSD. She has post-traumatic stress, with that. So I get it. But it's still fear, And now the biggest fear that we're looking at now, we have people that are fearful of taking a stand. Where our nation is now and what's happening with the people that are leading it, they're doing a lot of messed up stuff. And a lot of us are afraid to speak up and say, no, stop it. A lot of us are just sitting back and thinking that somebody else is going to stand up for us, and we're afraid to do it for ourselves because we're afraid to lose the little bit of what we have. And what is that? What do you have? If you're living in a house and you own it with the bank, then it's yours in the bank. The only thing you have is what you own. Like if you own your car and you're not making it and it's paid off, then you own that. If you own your house, you're not making any payments, then you own that. But other than that, the clothes that you have, the odds and ends that you paid off, those are the things that you own. So we're afraid of losing that instead of not standing up to bullies. I don't get it. Me, I'm not going to say I'm not afraid, because I am afraid, but I'm more afraid of not doing something. I'm more afraid of standing by and letting somebody that I know doesn't have my best interests at heart continue to run my life, which is why I'm a big, huge advocate of voting. Okay? You have to make sure people that have the same aligned values that you have that are leading you so that they can lead correctly. I think about the young men, white males in this country who are afraid that they're being left behind. They have a genuine fear. Now, I think that fear comes from something else, like, well, we've been on top for so long, what are we going to do if we're not on top? I think that's a whole fear in itself, and that's a whole mental thing. Like, you'll do what the rest of us have been doing. Colored people, women, you'll keep going. You'll survive. You'll keep fighting, but that whole fear is crazy with that. But, it's legitimate. It's a legitimate fear that they have. And as you saw with this whole storm in the Capitol some years ago, these people were afraid that the election was being rigged because the guy that they trusted to lead them was telling them that. And so they were afraid that they were being shortchanged. They were being cheated out of their votes. And so guess what? They did something about that. Now, the only thing I applaud about that is that they had the guts to do it. And unfortunately, it's going to take more of that on the other side at some point in order for this to get done. Because I fear, there's that word, I fear that enough of us aren't paying attention and are not going to get involved in this democracy in order to protect ourselves. We had 50 million people not vote in a presidential election. Like, why would we not vote in an election where on one side you had a convicted felon running for the highest office in the land versus somebody who wasn't a convicted felon? I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer, regardless if it was a woman, if she was a woman, regardless if she was a woman of color. But I can't think that Kamala Harris would have had us at this point where we are right now. I mean, this is dizzying. This is literally dizzying, everything that we're going to. And my fear is that, this country is going to be taken down to ashes before I'm dead. A lot of people don't care, because they say, well, I'm not going to be here. I've actually heard that. Well, I'm going to be dead and gone, But I actually love my kids, and now that I'm a grandfather, I think that they deserve a chance. They deserve to have a country where they can try and do better. And we all should want to leave it better than we started. And if fear is keeping us from doing that, then we have to figure out another way. We have to figure out another way. One of the biggest fears is the fear of the unknown. And let me just keep it here with black and white. There are a number of white people that do not understand black people, and because they do not understand them, they are afraid of black people. They're afraid of being in the room with black people. They're afraid of having black people be in charge of them. They're afraid of just all things black, because they don't understand. And when you think about it, most people say, well, we kept them enslaved for so long. What about if they want to exact vengeance? It's a fear. And let me just go ahead and say this. I've said it before. People keep trying to promote black people as violent, but black people are a spiritual people by nature. The lion, when he walks through the jungle, he isn't fearful of anything attacking him. And black people, because we come from the jungle, the only thing we were afraid of was the lion. We weren't afraid of other people. It isn't in our makeup. We were afraid of other things, the lions, the spirit, that controls all things, So it is not our nature to be violent despite what you see and what's purported or what's portrayed over the media. So, that fear, and it really sucks. And I try to chat up as many white folks as I can, and I try to talk about things that normally, black folk and white folk don't discuss, because, I think that the more often we have these conversations, we could disarm people. And at the end of the day, these people realize, and this is not all white people, okay? This is just the people that are afraid. I mean, I have white friends that understand the black experience, and they, are either they're for some things or they're against, but that's their opinion. But the whole fear of black people, getting in the elevator, white woman clutching her purse tighter, or, all that stuff, those are just fears. And, I tell you what, it's gotten a little bit more blown up since this young lady got killed on the light rail in Charlotte, Irina Zaruska, by this young man who was mentally ill. And, I'm just going to say that is society's fault. That is the government's fault. I don't know if you know about what's happening in North Carolina, but Mecklenburg County does not get the funds that it needs. Those funds are being put on hold by the General Assembly to go towards policing and mental health. And they're doing it on purpose because of the relationship between Mecklenburg County and the General Assembly of North Carolina. And those of you who are listening who live in Winston-Salem, Raleigh, Greensboro, Fayetteville, all these little metropolises across the state, we need you to help Charlotte out. We need for you to start sending elected officials to the General Assembly in Raleigh that are more progressive thinking and are not going there just so they can put a thumb on Charlotte. Because when you come here to this city and you have complaints about certain things, you have to look no further than right up 85 to 40 to the North Carolina General Assembly, because it's like, why are you doing this? Why are you preventing a city from providing the best that it can to its citizens? Why? Because you have individuals up there that, for whatever reason, got their thumbs up their butts, and they want to see the blue city have as many problems as possible. Well, let's withhold money from their police force and see how they police on a limited budget. That's exactly what they're doing. And with this whole transit tax, which we're going to get into in just a short bit, with this whole transit tax, the state is not giving us any money. Although the state is allowing this referendum to go on the ballot, we had to ask the state to allow it because, we have to report to the state. So the state is allowing us to ask for this 1 cent tax, but they're not giving us any money. There are no state-supported funds that are coming for this transit things. Charlotte, or rather Mecklenburg County, is going to foot the whole bill on this. So anyway, there's another fear. The fear that Charlotte's going to be a better city than any other city in North Carolina. Well, it already is, so, get over it. All right. Anyway, that's that. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and we're still going to talk about, our 10-minute transit tax talk tidbit. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about stress, because, of course, with fear comes stress. I want you guys to stay tuned. This is the Forecast. I am J.G. Lockhart. Be right back. All right, we're back here at the Forecast. It's your host, J.G. Lockhart. Just want to let you know I do not own the rights to Jeremiah or Tina Turner. The best, I don't own the rights to any of that. So just go ahead and put that out there. All right, we're back here at the show. I want to talk a little bit about stress. Oh my gosh, because before we left to go on the break, we were talking about fear. And believe it or not, fear is stress. So if you don't know what stress is, let's just jump into the definition that we have, and you can look this up for yourself. Stress is a natural human response to challenging or demanding situations that cause mental tension and worry. Understand? I mean, it's clear. It's a natural thing that happens. So stress is natural. And it's a response that comes from when you have challenging or demanding situations. So think about working every day. The challenge of getting up every day. Just think about if you're, a transit rider and, the challenge of waking up every day, going out, earning your dollars, or going to work with a boss that you don't like or don't get along with. Those are challenging, and the stress of the environment of the office or wherever the situation, like you're in a deadline. Those are things that cause mental tension and worry. There's also good stress too. There's a lot of good stress. Think about good stress when you're like if you're on a team and your soccer team, FC Charlotte, scores a goal, and you go, yeah, it's like, or the Panthers score a touchdown, like, yeah, it's a response to a challenging thing that caused mental tension no, that is not a good example. So forget about that one. But let's just stick with the whole stress part, okay? Because stress is real. As you all know, that I am a stroke survivor. And part of a lot of things that I was going through before my stroke were things that I could control, but a lot of it was attributed to stress. I had a lot of stressful things happening at work. I was doing a lot of things that were not good, period. And the physical consequences of stress are things such as cardiovascular health, weakened immune system, indigestion, heartburn, ulcers, increased susceptibility to infections, hormonal imbalances, weight gain or loss, sleep disturbances, insomnia, nightmares, fatigue, headaches, back pain, all of this stuff stress causes, skin problems, acne, and then the mental consequences, anxiety, depression, increased feelings of fear and sadness, mood swings, irritability, difficulty concentrating, feeling overwhelmed, cognitive impairment, difficulty with memory, decision making, problem solving, substance abuse, withdrawing from friends and family. These are consequences of stress. And there's so much stress that's being put on us daily. I mean, if you're on social media, that's a stressor right there. Because I know the first thing or the first three things you read, you're like, oh my God, that's, of course, it's stress. Also stress can lead to diabetes, cancer, and of course the big one is stroke. So stress is real, and we have to guard our stress. I have another cousin who always talks about peace is priceless. And she's absolutely right. Peace is priceless. But you have to go through stress daily if you're living, because you have to live. Just actually going out and getting into your car and driving through traffic is stressful, because you can't control what other people are going to do. You cannot do it. So you have to learn how to control your stress. Now, me, I was in the closet road rage guy. Like, I would be sitting in my car and I would cuss you out from inside my car. You never know it, of course. Except back in my younger days, I might roll the window down. But, now, I can't allow that stress to get to me, because anger is not a friend of mine. Everyone who's had a stroke before, that if you've had a stroke once, then you're more susceptible to having a stroke again. So controlling my stress, controlling my anger, or whatever I can control, I have to be cognizant of that. I mean, I have to be actively paying attention to that, and I can't allow myself to get, too high. My mother always talks about my grandfather, who died before I was born, how he died watching wrestling. And I didn't realize when I was coming up and I was watching TV and I'd be yelling at the TV on a football game, she'd be like, she gets so upset. Would you please stop yelling at the TV? My daddy died watching the game. I'm like, well, that sucked. What does that have to do with me? Well, now I know. And so you can imagine these past years since my stroke of being a Panther fan, I have had to take it on the chin. Oh my gosh, I've had to take it on the chin. Woo, woo. Y'all feel me. Panther fans, you feel me. But we're doing good now. We're okay. We're 3-3. All right. So anyway, you can't escape stress, but you can control your stress. And you have to find techniques for relieving stress. Some people use meditation. Some people, exercise. All these things help relieve stress. I know some people that like to gamble. They say it. It relieves the stress. Some people like to indulge in other things that, lead to stress. Now, if those things that you're doing are alcohol and drug abuse that you're using because of stress, well, that's you're adding gasoline to the fire, okay? Because that's not good. You really have to find a way. And I get it. I used to smoke cigarettes. Something would stress me out. Oh, let me smoke a cigarette. Well, the last cigarette I smoked, I felt like that. Something was stressing me out, work, and I went to smoke a cigarette, and that was the last cigarette I ever smoked thus far, and I don't plan on smoking anymore. So we have to find good, healthy ways of dealing with stress. If you're raising kids, being a single parent, being a parent is stressful. Shit. Well, okay. All right. I'm going to have to put that swear jar in here because we have not done well today. But, just being a parent is stressful. Being a caretaker, I had to take care of my father in his last days, in the last couple of years of his life. That's stressful itself. Nobody preps you for this stuff when you're young. Nobody tells you that one day you might have to do this or you might have to do that. You might have to wipe your dad's butt. I mean, when I had to actually wipe my father's butt, wash him up, that was stressful for me. In his last final days, to see his demise, that was very stressful. So there's so much stress out there that is around you that you can't avoid, that you have to try and actively avoid additional stressors in your life. And I would just encourage you, to figure out prayer. I'm not throwing my religion on anybody, but, oftentimes I have to get on my knees and, ask God for, direction to guide me right now with whatever's going on with this moment, to help me in that moment because I'm losing it, So there are ways to combat stress, and I encourage you to take a look at them and, please be healthy. That's the biggest thing. Just please be healthy in whatever you're doing because, we want you to stick around. All right. We want you to stick around. All right. We're going to take a quick break. I do want to get into our 10-minute transit tax tidbit. We got to get that in before the hour's up. So we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about this transit tax. We're going to kind of give you a background on what we're going to do, how we're going to do it going forward. And that's where we'll be. So this is JG Lockhart with the forecast. We'll be right back. Guys, stay tuned. All right, we're back here at the forecast. Just want to throw the disclaimer out there that I do not own the rights to Beyonce, Yellow Breezy, any of that. So in this last 10 minutes, we're going to do what we're calling our 10-minute transit talk, okay? Number one, because people have short attention spans, all right? And I'm not saying it's you, but some people have short attention spans. So what we're going to do between now and November the 3rd, which is the last day before the general election, we're going to kind of try and educate you, get you educated on some facts. And it's not going to be opinion, it's going to be facts to where you'll be able to go and, research this stuff yourself if you want to and all that. So let me just go ahead and pull this out. So this transit tax is a huge thing. We're talking about billions of dollars that we're going to commit, but let's kind of go back to the beginning, the history of how we got here. So let's go back to 1998. All right. In 1998, there was a transit tax referendum similar to this one. All right, exactly similar to this one. That among other things, they wanted the half-cent tax was to improve transit in Charlotte region, and supporters were hailing as a way to solve the transportation problems created by Charlotte's rapidly growing population. Now, I am reading this from a document that was put out in 2007. Okay, it's from the Spotlight on Charlotte's Transit, put out March 15, 2007, from the John Locke Foundation. If you want to read it in its entirety, go to my website, JGL4CLT, and look on the issues page, and bam, there it is. All right, this is the John Locke Foundation report. But anyway, as far as the transit, the funds from the half-cent tax that was put on the referendum would allow the expansion of the bus system and would match federal funds for the city's light rail system. Supporters argue that both systems would be integrated in a way that would serve the total transportation needs of Charlotte and surrounding communities. Right? Sounds good? Right, that's exactly what they're saying now. Right? So back in 1998, this transit tax referendum passed. It passed. We voted yes, and as a result of this transit tax passing in 1998, the following year, in 1999, we had what was called, let me pause it. So before 1998, you guys are probably thinking, well, what did we do before? I know I used to ride the buses before 1998. Well, our transportation system in Charlotte was privatized. Charlotte was, we had our own people who ran CATs. We hired them, we fired them, whoever it was, and we allowed them to manage our transit system. Well, as Charlotte grew and it was growing exponentially, the people in the surrounding towns of Charlotte were like, hey, the towns of Mecklenburg were, hey, well, we need some transit here. And, the plans, people were moving to these areas, Matthews, Mint Hill, Pineville, Cornelius, Huntersville, and they wanted, transit to be coming up there. And so Charlotte was trying to appease them by trying to provide transportation. Everybody at the end of the day was like, look, we need to come up with a better way. Why don't we raise money that would, benefit expanding the bus system and all that? So that's how they got to the 1998 tax referendum. But before then, Charlotte handled all of its own transportation needs for the city, okay, and the surrounding counties. So as a result of this transit tax passing in 1998, in 1999, two things happened. All right, CATS was founded. What Charlotte Transit used to be was no longer. Now it was called Charlotte Area Transportation Systems, or Charlotte Area Transit Systems, whichever it is. CATS was born, and the MTC was formed, the Metropolitan Transit Commission. Or is it MTC? Yeah, Metropolitan Transit Commission, which it is known now. Now, this Transit Commission was created by all of the mayors of the towns of Mecklenburg County. There are 7 cities/towns in Mecklenburg County. They are Cornelius, Charlotte, Huntersville, Davidson, Mint Hill, Matthews, and Pineville. Those are the 7 towns of Mecklenburg County. So all of these mayors signed what was called a Transit Governance Interlocal Agreement. Now, our mayor at the time was Pat McCrory. And Pat McCrory was trying to push light rail as far as solving transit needs. Not expanding the bus system, but he was pushing light rail, and he was asking for money for this light rail. Of course, every mayor wants to say that they did something spectacular for the city. They have their own special projects that they want to be able to put their name on, that happened while they were in office. And this is what Pat McCrory wanted. He wanted to bring a blue line to Charlotte. Now, forget the fact that the most traveled bus route was the number 7 route on Beatty'sford Road. We decided that, well, not we. Hold on, I'm getting too far ahead. So let me go back. So the MTC was formed in 1999, and the MTC, the Metropolitan Transit Commission, consisted of all of the mayors. So what happened as a result of the MTC being formed, the management and governance of Charlotte's transit system was now taken out of the hands of the professionals and now put in the hands of these transit amateurs, okay, these mayors, okay, and they were now in charge of providing the future growth and management of Charlotte's transit challenges. All right. So we took the professionals out of it and we put a bunch of mayors in charge of it. And so for the next 26 years, these mayors, as they would come in and out, mayors run for office and they get voted out, but any mayor that would be voted in would be on this Metropolitan Transit Commission, whether they had experience in transportation or not. Now, also on this Metropolitan Transit Commission, there also was the head of the Mecklenburg County Board of Commissions and the representative from the North Carolina Department of Transportation. So you had the 7 mayors of the 7 towns and cities, and you had the 1 member from the DOT, North Carolina DOT, and you had the Mecklenburg County chairperson. I believe back when this started, it was Parks Helms who was that. So you had these 9 people, and each one of them had a vote in what was said, what was planned, and what was done. Now, if you think about it, Charlotte is 85% of Mecklenburg County's population. That's right, 1 million strong. All of these other counties combined, all these other towns, combined do not have 1 million people, okay? Charlotte, as a matter of fact, there are less than 200,000 people in Huntersville, Cornelius, Davidson, Pineville, Matthews, and Mint Hill. There are less than 200,000 people in all those towns combined. Charlotte, of course, has 1 million folks. So Charlotte is 85% of Mecklenburg County's population, thus 85% of the tax base. But on this MTC, and this is where things started getting wrong from the beginning, we only had 1 vote. Charlotte only had 1 vote in a say in what was happening with Charlotte's transit system. It's almost like, of course, you and your buddies go in and buy a car and you put the most money in, but you only get 1 vote in where the car goes. And basically that's what happened with Charlotte. That was the first major problem with this thing. So Charlotte lost out with the transit from the beginning. As a result of this MTC taking over the governance, as a result, and this transit tax passed, a whole bunch of money was put into our transit system. Ridership increased 52%. All right. But as a result, the operating costs increased 234%. Now, if you don't know what percentages are, 234% versus 100% is a lot. And that's what happened. We had people who were amateurs, not professionals, that were voting for the future of our transit system, that were entrusted with the future of our transit system, that were now voting on it. And that was the Metropolitan Transit Commission, as it is now. Now they've expanded their base, but those were the original voting members. Now they've expanded to I think 17 members, which you still have those 9 voting members. But again, Charlotte only has 1 vote in what actually happens. Even on the Citizens Transit Authority, all right, where they report to the Metropolitan Transit Commission, Charlotte only has a couple of voices on it. So we have a single percentage say, and we have had a single percentage say, like 5-6% say in what has been happening with Charlotte's transit for the last 26 years. So when you start talking about how do we get here, well, we got here because, number one, things weren't done with Charlotte in mind, and number 2, they had the wrong people that were planning it, and number 3, Charlotte had no say-so. So when you get to the point where you're presenting us 25 years later with double what you asked for 25 years ago, 26 years ago, the question begs to ask, what did you do with that original amount of money? All that money that was raised from the half cent tax was supposed to do all these things. but because of overestimation, overspending, and just lack of experience, ignorance. I hate to say it. These guys might have been professionals in their own wheelhouse or in their own occupations, but they certainly weren't transportation professionals, and they ran our transit system in the ground. And now they're asking for another chance to get it right. So that is a little bit of the history of how this transit tax begun. Please go to my website, www.jgl4clt, and on my website on the issues page, you can look at this report and read it for yourself. It's a really short report, the John Locke Foundation report. Also on there is the PAVE Act, which is 27 pages long, and also on that page are the 3 transit governance local interlocal agreements that we have signed over the years. The first one that was signed in 1999, the second one that was signed in, I think, 2004, and the third one that was just signed last year or earlier this year in 2025. So this Metropolitan Transit Commission can call a meeting and they can change anything they want to change, and that's just too much power for people to have over something as expensive, over $30 billion. That's just too much power for these people to have, and they've already proven that they don't need it. They don't deserve to have this much power. So anyway, that's it. We called it 10 minutes, and my 10 minutes are up with the transit tax, and I'm done with that. And as a matter of fact, we are done with the show. So I appreciate you guys. Tune in tomorrow. We're going to have another 10-minute transit talk. We're going to talk about some more topics. You're listening to The Forecast with Jim Rico. Look forward to seeing, hearing, talking to you tomorrow. If I don't, you guys have a blessed weekend. Take care.